Hello. It's Sunday afternoon, and it was quite a late night because Jeremy was DJing at Band on the Wall in town, so I'm a bit croaky and a bit tired. We got in about 4 o'clock. Anyway, so far today, I've been reading Alan Garner again for the first time in 12 years, I'd say. It's a friend of mine, Bob Fisher's fault, who he posted about the first time he read The Weird Stone of Brisingamen. As a kid at school, and I had a flashback, and so picked out my copy, which I found eventually, which is one of these fantastic 70s copies, and promptly read the first 50 pages again, fell into it again. The funny thing about The Weird Stone of Brisingamen and those books for me nowadays is that the last 3 years we've had day trips there. We'd been before, but it's become this kind of ritual that Jeremy and I get in the car and go to Alderley Edge the very last day of summer each year. At least that's how it feels. It's usually the last day of September, the last working day of September anyway, when I'm preparing to start writing a new book the following Monday. And the last 3 years it's been a new Doctor Who book for Puffin, which takes me through the autumn. So 3 years ago it was Robin Hood, Doctor Who meets Robin Hood, and then the year after that it was Josephine and the Argonauts, and last year I did another, and I can't even say what that is yet because it's not been it's not been announced, but that's written. And so all of these visits, all of these books were begun with a visit to Alderley Edge and the Wizard, and that world, that kind of magical world. It's not too far from where we live in Manchester. It began because I wanted to walk around in autumn woods, or woods that were just beginning to turn crispy and colourful, to put me in the mood for a Robin Hood story. So that's me and the Weird Stone in recent times. It's sad to see that the pub called The Wizard is closed. During lockdown we had a trip there and sat outside and had coffee delivered through a hole in the wall, this kind of pop-up cafe. But it was sad to see that there's not a proper inn called The Wizard there anymore. I don't know if there's plans to reopen that. Anyway, somebody also asked after my first video yesterday about the shelves behind me in my study, which are, of course, rainbow coloured. That was for some photos I did for Levenshulme Pride, which Jeremy organises a few years ago, and they've stayed like that. I love my rainbow shelves. Although I hated the idea when I first saw it about 20 years ago in Norwich, when they opened their new big Millennium Library in town, and we walked in, and their shelves were organised by colour, and I thought it was the end of civilization, really. Such a snob. And it kind of made sense in a way that certain books have certain colours. The kind of pastels of women's contemporary fiction, the greens of Virago, the oranges of Penguin Classics, although those things have kind of changed and twisted around over the years. But these are some of my favourite books. They just happen to be falling into rainbow formation. I should go through them. It'd be nice to go through some bookshelves at some point for these videos and talk about what's here, because of course the whole room is walled around in stuff that's important to me. I think that's an important part of a working environment for any kind of writer, to be surrounded by things that you know well, that you can draw upon and use when you need to. But also things you haven't read. That's a big important, although everything in here I have, apart from those up there, those paperbacks, and I don't show you the hall where books are stacked taller than me, and those are all the things I haven't read. I think it's pronounced Sungdoku, but that sounds a bit Star Wars-ish. The Japanese word for having more books than you've read or you could possibly read. But how civilized that is, to have at your fingertips more books than than you'll ever be able to read. I like the sound of that, and that's how I've always tried to live. Well, not even tried, it's just how it's ended up. Books come to me. Books end up in your house somehow, and they always have. Anyway, more later. Socks is too tired to talk to anybody today. Socky. Nope. He's furious at me for not sitting still and carrying on reading my Alan Garner book. I had to get up and make coffee and leave him. So I'm going to sit with him for a bit longer now, because he missed us all last night because we were out till very late. This is the red and into pink section of the rainbow shelves. And it's funny just seeing what falls together at random because of just the colour of their spines. And so there's Dave Hill from Slade, his memoir, which I adored a few years ago. Humphrey Carpenter's book about the geniuses of Paris. Gertrude Stein, Hemingway, which is hilarious and not that different, to be honest, to Slade and The Sweet and Susie Quatro in the 70s. February House, Cheryl Tippins' book about the house in Brooklyn shared by this odd assortment of writers, W.H. Auden and Carson McCullers and Gypsy Rose Lee and various others. Salvador Dali lived with them for a while. This is, I think, during the Second World War. It's a wonderful book that became a musical. A novel by Stella Gibbons, My American, which I've read a couple of times, which I love as well. It's one of her more serious books, although I hate that word, serious. Jenny and the Cat Club, a vintage kids book. Oh, Julia Darling's short stories, Bloodlines, which she sent me, I remember, when this came out. Julia was a wonderful writer from Tyneside. And I was her guest in 2001 at a festival called Proud Words she organised in Newcastle. And that was the party on the last night where her band played in the theatre. Anyway, when the festival finished, she was off to Africa the next day, but she ran out to the post at dawn to post a collection of her stories for me. The whole festival was a kind of party, really. That's what I remember. It was me and Stella Duffy were the guests of honour. We were so proud to be at the heart of all that, of all these workshops and activity in Newcastle. Valley of the Dolls, Daisy Jones and the Six, which I liked, which was kind of Fleetwood Mac fan fiction, really. Tuesdays with Maury, Several Perceptions. This is Angela Carter. And when I was doing my PhD on Carter in the early 90s at Lancaster, I found this for £2.65 in a second-hand shop in Headingley in Leeds. And it was such a find with its gold cover, kind of Bieber style. I think it's not a first edition, it's a second, but it's from 69, the year that I was born, so it was important. And it's one of her crazy books set in Bristol in the 60s, very decadent and phantasmagorical. That's what she was. That's a treasured book. Jane Yolen's Fairy Tales, Enid Blyton's Faraway Tree, Dougal, Eric Thompson. And here, not quite fitting in with the colour scheme, but that's what happens when you have a scheme, Basil Brush and the Dragon and his friend the Mole. Now these are Peter Firmin who created Basil, the books that he did in the 70s, and they're little chapter books, tiny chapter books. And I read them as a kid and got them from the book club at school. This is an extra one. I don't remember this one so well. The one I remembered was about going to sea. Anyway, they're wonderful, beautifully illustrated by Peter Firmin, who I think was a lovely artist. So these are kind of treasured. And amazing to still have, from the school book club that we that we used to send off our little slips from the booklet. I think it was every month, and then eventually a box of books would arrive for the whole class with your order slip inside the book. I think that in a way was the beginning of book collecting, book hoarding in some ways. The fact that these things just arrived like magic. Anyway, there's lots to show you just in this room, and lots of stories attached to the books that are stacked up here. And it's nice for me to kind of disinter them and think about them, and think about how these things have arrived in my life. So if you want to hear more about all of this stuff, carry on tuning in, if that's a phrase that people still use. So I'm such an old git. And share the video and like it, and all those things that people do. Anyway, see you next time.